Tensions are rising with Iran and looking more and more like the only thing the U.S. wants is war. The Iranians have said they want to make a deal, but the U.S. is saying they're not interested. All of this as the increasing sanctions on Iran threaten to kill thousands of civilians. We're going to go over all of that right now. Let's start off with the tit for tat that is going on between the two nations. Now, the USS Boxer shot down an Iranian drone, saying that it was threatening its boundaries. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Here is what Trump had to say about it. Mr. Trump said the USS Boxer, an amphibious assault ship, took defensive action against the drone, which he said was threatening safety of the ship and the ship's crew. The drone was immediately destroyed, Mr. Trump said in comments from the White House. He called the approach by the drone the latest of many provocative and hostile actions by Iran against vessels operating in international waters. So let's break this down for just a second here. So they're saying that this was the latest of many provocative and hostile actions by Iran, yet this was, the USS Boxer, is an amphibious assault ship that, yes, was in international waters, but international waters that are 6,000 miles away from the United States, all the way right on to the coast of Iran. So we have an amphibious assault ship hovering off the coast of Iran. The Iranians see this and think, let's go send a drone out there to see what it's doing. And this amphibious assault ship shoots down the drone, and yet Iran is the hostile actor. I don't know who's buying that. I mean, if they sent an amphibious assault ship off of our coast, you can believe us that we would be sending drones out, probably doing way more than sending a drone out to their amphibious assault ship, that's for sure. Goes on to say here, a Defense Department official confirmed that the drone came too close to the USS Boxer and was shot down. The official said the ship was in international waters when the encounter happened. The encounter Thursday came after Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said it had seized a tanker, ratcheting up fears that Tehran could further disrupt shipping traffic on a vital waterway for crude. So here was the other tit for tat. A couple of weeks ago, the British actually seized an Iranian oil tanker, the Grace 1, that was making its way most likely to Syria to drop off oil, although the Iranians won't confirm that. They're not really confirming or denying. They're just saying it's actually none of your business where our oil tanker was headed. It's none of your business. Just give us back our oil tanker. Now, the British say that they seized it because it was off the coast of Gibraltar and it was making its way to Syria to deliver oil, and they have sanctions against Syria for getting oil. Although Iran has no sanctions against Syria, the EU has the sanctions. Iran is not a member of the EU last time I checked, but nonetheless, the British felt like they could seize this tanker that was potentially on its way to deliver oil to Syria. Syria is an ally of Iran. So this other ship that Iran confiscated, now it was a little bit strange. At first, they took the vessel. It's a small ship. It doesn't carry barrels and millions of barrels of oil. It's fairly small. And the Iranians at first really weren't saying whether or not they had seized the vessel. Then they came out and said, yes, that they had helped the vessel, that the vessel was actually in distress and that they were answering a distress call. But now they've come out and said, no, actually, we did take this vessel, but the reason why we seized it was because it was smuggling oil off of our coast and it was going to sell it somewhere. It was like a pirate ship. Now, interestingly, an Israel-based company kind of confirmed this. This was also in the Wall Street Journal. It says, over the last year, the Raya, which was the name of the vessel, has transferred its cargo to vessels that made frequent trips to Yemen and Somalia, according to Windward, an Israel-based shipping analytics firm. The ship switched off its radio signal for 27 days over the past year, an indication it may have wanted to obscure its activities, according to Israeli shipping analytics company Windward. Now, what's interesting about that is that Israel and Iran are not friends at all. In fact, Israel is likely the ones that are going to be engaging Iran and starting a war. Yet this is an Israeli company that said, yeah, actually this ship was kind of up to no good. It looks like it was up to no good considering it was doing these things. So perhaps Iran had a reason to confiscate this ship, to seize this ship. Now, the Iranians say, look, this is something we do all the time. If we suspect a ship of pirating and smuggling, we then seize it. We go in and we investigate. That is something that we do on a regular basis. It's protocol. The United States does this as well off of our coast. If we suspect a ship is smuggling something that it's not supposed to be smuggling, then yeah, you could imagine that Coast Guard and DEA go and they actually board the ship and seize it and do what they need to do to investigate. So that is the latest with the tit for tat. Now, the Iranians have come out and they're saying that they're interested in sort of redoing the nuclear deal in order to lift the sanctions on Iran permanently. So what they're offering is they're saying that they will allow for investigators and inspectors to come into Iran at a much greater level than they were before under the previous deal and really inspect and ensure that they're not building a bomb, that they'll allow a ramped up version of inspections in exchange for the United States lifting the sanctions. Iran is saying, look, if you really don't want war with us, then you need to put your money where your mouth is. We will give you a lot of different ways of knowing for sure that we are not building a nuke. And in exchange, you have to lift the sanctions. You guys are saying you're worried about weapons of mass destruction. We're going to prove to you we don't have weapons of mass destruction. And in exchange, you have to lift these sanctions because that's what you're saying you're worried about. Now, the United States has come back and said, you know what? Yeah, we want that, but we also want more. We don't want just to know for sure that there are no weapons of mass destruction in Iran. We also want a whole host of things. They've listed 12 things to Iran, many of which have nothing to do with building a nuke. For example, they want the Iranians to stop supporting their allies abroad. They no longer want the Iranians to help the Syrians or Yemen or Lebanon. They want Iran to cut off all of its activities with its allies, which have nothing to do with building a weapon of mass destruction. So the Iranians are saying, look, if you really, truly are concerned about the weapons of mass destruction, then we will do everything we can to show you that we're not building one. In exchange, you have to lift these sanctions. So let's talk about these economic sanctions on Iran. Why would they be willing to do this? Well, because economic sanctions kill. They kill more people than actual bombs. The reason why economic sanctions are popular, which they became popular in the 90s, and they've continued to be popular governments to use them on other governments in order to kind of get them to do what they want. The reason why they're popular is because they're easier for the average person to stomach. You don't end up seeing the string of dead bodies from a bomb. Instead, there is a massive death toll, but you don't really ever have to deal with it. So it makes you feel warm and fuzzy on the inside. We're not bombing them. How bad can it be? Well, I'll tell you how bad it can be. The reason why economic sanctions are so deadly is because they target civilians. They do not target military. They don't target the wealthy. They target the civilians. And really, mostly they target those with weakened immune systems. So they target infants and women who've just had babies, the elderly and the sick. That is, and the extreme poor. That is who they target. The reason is because when you put economic sanctions on a country, the value of their money goes way down. So if you're already poor, you become really poor. And if you're middle class, you become poor. Because all of a sudden, let's say your annual salary is $50,000 a year and your country gets hit with economic sanctions, your $50,000 all of a sudden plummets and maybe it's worth $25,000. Or in the case of Venezuela, their currency was slashed by way more than half. I mean, it was... people went from middle class to extreme poverty. All of a sudden, it disrupts the supply chain because the way they often do sanctions, now they're not technically allowed to sanction things like food and medicine, but what they do is they sanction things like banks. So how are you going to buy the foods and the medicines you need from international distributors if your banks can't make those deals? So that is the way that this harms, especially those with a weakened immune system. If you are, for example, somebody who needs insulin on a regular basis and you're a middle class or even poor person, and all of a sudden the cost of insulin goes through the roof because people can't get their hands on it, because they can't do the deals through the banks. And because of it, the cost, because there's limited supply, goes through the roof. And so you can't get it. And the choice is you either pay through the nose in order to get the limited supply of insulin, or you die because you need that money to feed your infant children. You know, it's like if you're a middle-aged person, your choice is your kids or your parents. And so that is how economic sanctions kill. In fact, what we know about Iraq when we put economic sanctions on them, when we were trying to squeeze Saddam Hussein, was it killed over 500,000 children. Children have weakened immune systems. They need food. They need medicine. There's preventable diseases that they need shots for. They need, there's a lot of things there. 500,000 kids were said to have died in Iraq because of our economic sanctions. And guess how we handled that? We knew about it. Look at this interview with Madeleine Albright.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
So we knew about these economic sanctions, but, you know, we apparently felt like it was worth it. Killing off 500,000 kids is worth it. And yeah, you know, you just don't end up seeing the visual of it. You don't get the visuals of these bombs that end up stringing bodies around, or chemical weapons with bodies that are left around. That is just not something you see with economic sanctions. So people can stomach a little bit better. So the Iranian people are feeling very squeezed. Their currency is plummeting. They're having the supply chain is disrupted. You know, the supply chain gets disrupted when part of the supply chain means you have to buy something from overseas, and yet the banks can't do those transactions because they're sanctioned. So they're starting to really feel this pressure. There's also what's called a chilling effect. It's not just the sanctions on a nation directly, but it's also the chilling, because what happens is the government will say to a third country, if you dare do business with the country that we're against, whether we've put sanctions on them or not, but they're our enemy, we don't like them, if you dare do business with them, we're going to put sanctions on you. And we've done this on numerous occasions, like, for example, with Venezuela. We did this where even if we weren't sanctioning them directly, we put a very chilling effect on other nations who were even considering, or companies who were considering doing business with them. They knew that if they dare touch Venezuela, it would potentially put them in the crosshairs of the United States, and they didn't want that. So even the chilling effect can be very negative. We see this all the time with, like, Wall Street, you know, when they say, oh, no, there was a scare and now everybody's pulling their money out. That happens also when it comes to these kind of economic warfare tactics with these nations. So it's not just the direct sanctions, it's everything that's around it. And it's all very, very deadly. The Iranians have potentially they could lose thousands of their civilians. And this is disgusting. It's not an attack on military. It's not an attack on the people at the highest levels. It's an attack on the everyday average person. So they're offering a deal, and the United States is pretty much thumbing their nose at it and saying, no, we don't want your stinking deal. We want war, apparently. I mean, that's the only other option. I don't know the other out. The only out I can think of is we're trying to escalate ourselves into a war. And what's likely, the most likely scenario, would be Israel launches into the war with Iran, and the United States backs up Israel because we're their biggest ally. So we would be the muscle right behind Israel. And the way that we're kind of giving this narrative that is in the news and in the media, the narrative of Iran building these nukes, them being a big threat, weapons of mass destruction all over again, 2.0 here. This is then trying to brainwash the average American into then supporting the effort once Israel does it, and then we go and we back them up. That is why shows like this message is so important to get out there. The more we can shed light on the reality of what is going on, the more that we can tell the American people that this is the truth here. The more we can do that, the more it changes public sentiment. Public opinion begins to shift. Americans are good people. We do not want to murder thousands of people across the ocean. We just don't want to do this. This is not what the American people are about. Our government has slipped away from the average American. This is not a representation of us. This is not a representation of what we stand for or what we want. Our government has become corrupted, and it has slipped away, and it is the military-industrial complex and big oil and big banks, and we have lost control, but we still have some control, and that is our public sentiment. That is our popular public opinion. And if it becomes extremely unpopular to go to war with Iran, if it becomes extremely unpopular to back up Israel in a war with Iran, then the American politicians won't go for it. That is the one good thing. That's the one piece of ammunition we've got as the American people. Is our politicians want to get reelected. So it's extremely important that we continue to spread the truth, talk about the truth, talk about what is really going on with these nations, and with our ramping up of rhetoric and the fact that they're asking to do a deal, a good deal, and yet we're still rejecting it. It's important we get this word out because we've got to help try to shift and morph this public opinion so that we can avoid massive casualties of thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So thank you so much for watching this show and supporting this message. Please, you can help support. I often get demonetized. You can help support by, I've got links down below, PayPal and Patreon. You can support me through there. And also just share this message. Help open the eyes to your fellow Americans, to your colleagues, your friends, your family, to help change this public opinion so that we can ensure that we don't not only cost the lives of many innocent Iranian civilians, but also American soldiers, Israeli soldiers, anybody. We just need to try to spare lives. That's what we've got to do here. So thank you so much for watching.